Carl left the house. Today was an important day for him. He had been working for a construction company for 2 years, and today was something like an exam interview. The management from the capital came. They would bid farewell to the old branch director and appoint a new one. There were 3 candidates for the position, everyone prepared carefully. Each was required to provide a development plan for the company. Carl worked on it for almost a month, and he was confident that his work was the best. He loved his job. Carl read a lot since childhood. It was then that he decided to become a builder, and that he would build conscientiously, not like those who built a new house in his district. Carl and his friends often played at the construction site. Once, some slab wobbled under Carl's feet. He shouted, tried to hold on to something, but could not. He fell down from a height of 4 meters. Gravel was piled up below, and large pieces of concrete were lying there. That's what he fell on. At first he didn't even lose consciousness, and it didn't hurt. Then fear came and he tried to stand up, and it was then that a sharp pain pierced his body. 6 months in the hospital, 3 operations. Carl could hardly understand what was happening around him. Every day he asked his mum to take him away. "Mummy, please, I can't take it anymore. Take me home." And she was just crying and kissing him. Sometimes Dad appeared. He sat by his son's bed, held his hand, and was silent. After 6 months, the doctors first let him go home for 3 months, but only temporarily. Carl was old enough to understand that. He was 10 years old at the time. One early morning, when his parents thought he was asleep, Carl heard their conversation in the kitchen. He couldn't get up, but his mum always left the door open to hear if her son would call her. "Ray, what are we going to do? The operation is in a month and we have no money." "Lydia, well, what do you suggest? Sell a kidney? Come on, find a buyer. I'll sell it." "Ray, stop kidding. We need to come up with something." "Lydia, we just need to postpone the operation." "Are you crazy? Haven't you heard what the doctor said? Every month reduces the chances." A chair fell in the kitchen. Apparently, Dad jumped up. "Lydia, I'm doing everything I can. We've already spent away all the money. Everything, you understand? And those that were saved for his education, and those that were saved for repairs. Everything. You understand? But no, you demand something else from me." "I'm not demanding anything. Ray, I just have a feeling that you don't care. Do you even understand that our son may never walk again?" "I understand." "And you? What have you done to help him walk? Your accountant's salary at the nursing home is too small. It's almost non-existent." "But, Ray..." The front door slammed loudly. This means Dad has already left. Carl heard his mother's footsteps approaching the room. He tightly closed his eyes, let her think he was sleeping, and tears wouldn't roll out of his closed eyes. Every day the boy waited to be taken to the hospital, but time passed, and he realized that his parents had not found the money, and he would be forever tied to his bed. He tried to distract himself by reading. He read so much that his eyes often got tired and his head hurt, but it helped to fall asleep quickly. And then something happened that divided his life into 2 halves. Before the betrayal and after. His mother, his beloved mother, simply left him. She came in one morning in street clothes, put a small travel bag on the floor and sat on the edge of his bed. "How are you, son?" she asked quietly. Carl put the book aside. "As usual." where are you going?" "Son, I need to leave. I came to say goodbye. I want you to know I love you more than anything in the world, more than my own life. Everything will be all right for you, I promise." The mother quickly kissed Carl and rushed out the door. He didn't even understand at first that she wasn't leaving for a day, but for a lifetime, and that she had simply abandoned him. Fortunately, his father was there to support and calm him down. In a month, he found the money for the operation, and Carl was finally able to take his first steps. He decided for himself that he no longer had a mother. He had a father who became everything to him. After almost a year of rehabilitation, Carl was able to return to school. His father even arranged for him to take express exams for the past year so that he could return to his own class. And then one day, Carl's father brought Laurie home. Although Carl didn't like her, he was always very polite to her. How could he be angry with his dad or give him orders? 20 years passed. Carl approached his car and stopped for a minute. He had bought the car just 2 weeks ago, and he still wasn't tired of admiring it. When he got into his car, he saw a young girl on the sidewalk staring at him intently. At first, Carl thought she was someone he knew, but then looking at her he dismissed the idea. She was too unfashionable and poorly dressed, so she certainly could not be his acquaintances. As the car drove away, the girl took out a photo from her pocket. It was a photo of Carl when he was very young. She sighed with satisfaction, picked up her bag, and walked away. In the evening, Carl returned home in a great mood. Everything had gone as he thought. From today, he was the director of his branch. Few people achieved such a thing at only 30 years old. Carl packed his car and opened the trunk, taking out a cake and a package of champagne. He called his father in the morning and told him to set the table for celebrating. After saying this, he heard Laurie's displeased voice in the background. "He could have invited us to a restaurant." But Carl didn't let it spoil his mood. Of course he could have invited them to the restaurant, but he wanted to celebrate at home with his father, who had been there, who had once spared nothing to get him back on his feet. "Carl?" He turned around. In front of him stood the same girl from that morning. Up close, she turned out to be beautiful, with blue eyes and a blonde ponytail. Perhaps they knew each other after all. He searched for possible options in his head but found nothing suitable. Then he gave up. "Yes, do I know you?" "No, we don't know each other, thank God, but I need to talk to you." He raised an eyebrow. The girl was clearly hostile towards him. Damn, maybe he met her at Tom's country house. They had a great time that weekend, and honestly, Carl didn't remember half of it. "Well, let's talk. I can spare you 5 minutes." "I don't need that much time. Here, this is the address where your mother is. She's seriously ill. If you don't want to help her, at least come and visit her. Maybe you won't have a chance to meet her again." Carl withdrew the hand that he had reached out for the note. "I don't have a mother." The girl looked at him closely. "You're wrong. You have one, and no matter how hard you try to hide from it, she won't disappear." "Okay, let it be, but I don't want to see her." "Take the address. And just think that not everything in life is exactly as it seems to us. Goodbye." She handed him the note and quickly walked away. The evening was ruined. Carl didn't even know why he didn't tell his father anything. Probably just didn't want to spoil his mood. His dear father didn't deserve that. 2 days passed, and Carl kept thinking about the note that was lying in his pocket. On Saturday, after another restless night, he finally decided to go and just look into the eyes of the one who left him ill. He had to search for a long time. He circled around the suburban streets, which were all lined with old shacks, and couldn't find the right house. And then he saw her, that same girl. He stopped. "Hey, what's your name?" The girl turned around in surprise and smiled. "Did you come after all?" "I just want to look her in the eyes. Show me how to find this damn house." "Here it is, right behind you." Carl turned around and cursed. There was even a sign with a number on the house which he stubbornly didn't notice. The young man climbed up the old creaky stairs to the second floor. He reached out to ring the bell and lowered his hand. Mum. He couldn't remember anything bad except her leaving. Before, she loved him, cried by his bed, stroked his hand while he pretended to sleep. But now he had to pull himself together. This was the same woman who left him, afraid of difficulties. Dad said he tried to persuade her to stay, promised to find money, but Mum didn't listen to anyone. Apparently she already had someone who was more important to her than her son. The bell rang unexpectedly loud, and then Carl noticed that the door was slightly open. He walked in and immediately heard a voice. "Emily, is that you?" It was his mum's voice. Carl took a step forward. "No, it's not Emily." The woman lying on the couch groaned. "Son, Carl." "Yes, it's me." She tried to stand up but couldn't. Carl was standing in front of her and couldn't do anything. He didn't want to help her. He didn't want to touch her. The mother apparently understood this. "Son, sit down, there's a chair there," she said. He sat down and looked around. Poverty was staring at him from every corner. Everything seemed clean, but the feeling that he was in some kind of homeless shelter did not go away. Outside, some woman was screaming loudly. His mother smiled slightly. "That's the neighbours making a fuss. It's not uncommon here. How are you doing, son?" Carl smirked. "Don't you think it's a little late to be asking those questions?" "I'm sorry," the mother answered and got silent. Carl felt she was examining him. Then he noticed a childhood photo on the table next to the sofa. What a hypocrite his mother was. Now he understood everything completely. Apparently, her lover had left her a long time ago. Somehow, she found out that everything was wonderful in her son's life and decided to lure money out of him. Of course, that explains everything. "Why did you track me down? What do you want? Money? You don't bother putting on a show for me? Get up. Maybe you can at least make some tea." The mother tried to get up again. She managed to lower her legs to the floor, but didn't have the strength to go further. She said quietly, "I'm sorry, son. I can't seem to get up." The door slammed shut, and Emily entered the room. She immediately rushed to Carl's mother. "Lydia, have you lost your mind? You were absolutely forbidden to get up." The girl quickly put the woman back in her place, then turned to Carl. "What are you looking at? Why did you let her?" "Come on, maybe I should have put her to bed. I figured out your plan. You could have just asked for money without making up all this drama." "What?" Emily squinted. "Money? You'll never be able to pay your mother for your life." "Natashenka, no need." No need. Lydia was sobbing uncontrollably. But Emily was unstoppable, and crossing her arms over her chest, she continued, And it's very convenient not to know. You sleep better if you don't know, right? Carl, are you doing well? Okay, get out of here. Your mum has already looked at you, and that's enough. Suddenly there was a sigh from the sofa. Emily turned sharply, ran to her, and shouted at Carl. Carl poked at his phone with his fingers and didn't understand anything. So she really called him to see how he was before she died. Probably to ask for forgiveness. The ambulance took Lydia away and he followed. He made sure that his mother received all the necessary help, then asked the doctor, "When can I visit her?" "Tomorrow afternoon. Be sure to come. Things are not going well," answered the doctor. Carl left the hospital and immediately saw Emily crying on a bench near the entrance. He walked over and sat down next to her. "Why are you crying? The doctor said you can visit tomorrow." She raised her wet eyes and said, "Really? I got so scared for her." "Yeah, can I take you home?" "Thank you, if it's not too much trouble." Carl pulled out of the hospital parking lot. He decided to come back tomorrow to give his mother a chance to ask for forgiveness and calm down her soul. But if she hopes for any kind of relationship, then she's wrong. They drove through an already familiar neighbourhood, and Carl was very surprised. "I live in the same apartment building as Lydia, just at a different entrance." "So, you're neighbours?" asked Carl, who just didn't know what else to say. The girls looked at him strangely, then nodded and asked, "So, are you going to see your mum tomorrow?" "Yes, I promised the doctor I would stop by." "Tell me, what time will you go?" Carl felt joy. She was definitely interested in him. Of course, she dressed modestly, but her figure and face were beautiful, so he definitely wouldn't mind having an affair with her. "At 3 o'clock. Okay, I'll come later. I don't think you'll be there long." "Why later?" Carl was disappointed. Emily had already gotten out of the car, but before closing the door, she replied, "So as not to cross paths with you." The door slammed shut, and Carl stared back at her for a while longer. Finally, he shook his head and slapped his palms on the steering wheel. "This is unacceptable. Who does she think she is?" He drove the car towards home, anger bubbling up in his chest. How could his mother do this? She left him a sick boy. She simply didn't want to burden herself with care, and now, thanks to this Emily, she was trying to make him feel guilty about something. No way. They found the wrong person. To hell with them all. He wouldn't even think of visiting her at the hospital tomorrow. Let them deal with this mess themselves. Carl was so angry that he didn't notice the red traffic light, the screeching of brakes, the impact, and the darkness. He couldn't wake up, or rather, he wasn't asleep, but he still couldn't wake up. Nothing hurt. There was some emptiness around him, but he understood that he could hear everything. It's just that he couldn't wake up. He heard footsteps, light ones, barely audible. "Hello? Oh, it's the little wicked one. Emily, right?" Carl made an incredible effort and opened his eyes. Emily, and it was her, immediately disappeared, and a second later the doctor's face appeared. "Hello, I'm Dr. Sullivan. What's your name?" "Carl. How old are you?" 30. "Great," said Dr. Sullivan, and shone a flashlight in Carl's eyes, causing him to close them immediately. "Excellent, then rest." The doctor disappeared and Emily reappeared. "I won't be long. Your family just left not long ago. Your stepmother is such an unpleasant woman. How have you been living with her? She convinced everyone here to give her a paper stating that you won't become helpless after the accident. Your father tried to calm her down, but she screamed, "I'm filing for divorce. I won't live under the same roof with your disabled son." I'm not surprised. I'm starting to get used to it. Get used to what? Well, as soon as something happens to me, women abandon me. Are you talking about your mother now? Emily's eyes sparkled warily, but she calmed down and continued, "You shouldn't say that. But who am I talking to? I thought you hit your head so hard that your brain was put in the right place, but no, it remained where it was. You know, at first, I had a better opinion of you. Rather, I hoped that you would at least try to find out the truth to understand who is really guilty. But you, Emily couldn't find the right words. Anyway, get well soon." She walked to the door, and Carl watched her before closing his eyes. He never thought that there were people who could upset him in 2 minutes, despite lying there filled with injections. What's wrong with her? What is she talking about all the time? What truth is she talking about that he doesn't know, and that should immediately change his opinion about the whole world? His head ached, and he wanted to know the terrible secret that Emily constantly talked about. On the other hand, she could tell him everything herself and not create confusion and run away. Bad luck for her husband, if there was one at all. The doctor came to him in the evening. "Well, what can I say? It's not as bad as it seems. You can sit down. Get up slowly. The blow hit your forehead, but your forehead turned out to be strong." Carl immediately sat down. His head spun, but it was tolerable. "Doctor, tell me, a woman got to the hospital yesterday, most likely McClincy, but may have a different surname. How can I find her?" The doctor slapped himself on the forehead. "And I was thinking, where do I remember you from? You came with her, didn't you?" "Yes, that was me," said Carl. "She is in the 7th ward. The department is across from this one. I need to go there." "Well, no, that's out of the question. Such long trips are not necessary yet. Let's observe you for a day or 2, then you can go." The doctor left. Carl waited another half hour. The hospital was already quiet. He slowly approached the door and peeked out. No one was in the corridor. Only cheerful voices could be heard from the nurses' station. Apparently the nurses were chatting. Carl crept along the wall to the door of the ward, opened it slightly and stepped into the corridor. He rested for a bit and headed towards the opposite door. There was no one in the corridor there either. He chose the perfect time. The patients had been fed and settled, and now the staff could eat and rest. The 7th ward was right in front of him. He didn't have time to think. He pulled the door towards him. His eyes didn't immediately adjust to the semi-darkness, and when they did, he saw his mother. "Carl! What happened to you, son?" "It's nothing, just hit my head. Do you know why I came?" She shook her head negatively. "You have to tell me why you abandoned me. I thought I didn't care about it, but now I understand that I would like to know. I want to understand who you met on your way that made you decide to abandon a sick child." She was silent for a minute, then answered, "I didn't abandon you, Carl. I just had no other choice." "Lies. I remember you coming to say goodbye to me. No one forced you out of the house. You made that decision yourself, right?" "Right, of course, myself. No one forced me," answered the mother and sighed. "Honestly, Carl was disappointed. Only now did he realize that he entertained the thought that after his mother's story he could forgive her. Well, if not entirely, then at least a little. He wanted to help her. In treatment, maybe even in something else, but how could he help a person who had treated him like that? Well, now just tell me the reason and I'll go. I understand a sick child is a burden, but you didn't leave for nothing, did you? Okay, I'll tell you everything, but it's not a short story. I'm not rushing, answered Carl, and sitting in the chair got ready to listen. Lydia sighed and closed her eyes. Your surgery was postponed again and again. I realized that with each time the chances became smaller. There was no money. At all. I tried to get a loan. I put the apartment up for collateral, but everywhere the amount offered was not even half of the expenses. 3 months after you were discharged, I started to notice that our father smelled of another woman's perfume. There were traces of lipstick on his shirt. And then I realized that Ray wouldn't help us with anything. He distanced himself. He had his own, separate personal life from us. I had to act as soon as possible. Carl looked at his mother in complete bewilderment. She was saying something strange. Father was always around. He found that damned money. True, Carl never asked where he had found them. Besides, he remembers it well. After the surgery they started living better. Dad opened his own small business. Yes, he was never home, but Carl, though not yet an adult, understood perfectly well that his father needed to work a lot. Lydia continued. Once, exhausted from running around to banks, I sat on a bench in the park and cried. Then someone called out to me. I looked up and saw my friend Laurie. Because of recent events, I hadn't seen her in almost a year. She sat down and we talked. She was so outraged with Ray's behaviour and his cheating. And as a farewell, she said, I'd also think about it, and if I come up with something, I'll call you right away. I don't know if you can call it luck, but literally 2 days later, her boss's daughter hit and ran someone. Laurie, seeing that her boss wasn't upset, asked if anything had happened. They had a good relationship, and her boss told her everything. Together, they came up with a solution. She called me that night and said that her boss was willing to pay twice as much as needed for the operation. I had an hour to decide. Your father wasn't home. Laurie said that the remaining money could be spent on the best lawyer who could minimize my sentence. Yes, they offered me to take the blame for the boss's daughter. I agreed. I understood that I wouldn't see you for a very long time, but at least you could run like before. Your dad only showed up in the morning. I told him everything. He agreed with my decision. He said he would do everything to get the shortest possible sentence. He couldn't come to the trial because he was with you in the hospital. Laurie didn't come either. But I knew for sure that you were already being helped, and I was hoping for an amnesty. However, I was given 9 years. I don't know why so much. Maybe they found something else there, or maybe the person who died wasn't just an ordinary man. As you understand, there was no reconsideration of the case, no lawyers, nothing. I couldn't tell the truth. It would only make things worse. The money was paid and the operation was done for you. That boss kept her promise. I was released on parole after 7 years and went straight home. I really wanted to see you, but the door of my house was opened by Laurie. It can't be. Laurie? Unfortunately, yes. It was she who insisted on leaving everything as it was. It was to her that your dad used to run at night. I don't blame him. Not everyone can handle what we had at home. A puzzle was forming in Carl's head. Money, a better life, Laurie. I left. Laurie explained to me that you hated me and your father loved her. You have a family, and I'm not needed by anyone anymore. I rented this apartment. It's not expensive. I got a job at the factory. I often came to your house, then to the college. I watched you from afar very often. I cried and admired. You grew up to be a real handsome man, a smart one. I'm very proud of you. I would never have stood in your way. But Emily, I once made the mistake of telling her everything. And Emily was burning with indignation all this time. And when I got sick, she decided to find you. I was against it. But she is stubborn. Yes, that's for sure. Carl was quiet for a while, digesting the information and getting used to it. Why didn't you come to see me earlier? Why didn't you tell me? Well, if I hadn't started listening, you would have written a letter. Lydia was silent. Mum, are you listening? He asked irritatedly. Silence again. Carl rushed to the bed and Nina's hand hung limply. Her cheeks were wet with tears, eyes closed, and her lips were white. Mum! He touched her, and the second hand also slid like a rag. Carl grabbed his mother by the shoulders. Mum! Mum, not now, please! He shook her and shouted, and tears streamed from his eyes. Someone pulled him away from the bed, and then he felt a prick in his shoulder and darkness. He didn't want to leave. He wanted to be there next to his mum. He woke up in his room with his father sitting next to him. Carl looked at him and couldn't understand how he could go on living. Why couldn't he live without hate? He had hated his mother so much, and now it turned out he needed to hate his father? Dad? Ray stirred and opened his eyes. Son. Dad, is it all true? Everything my mother has told me? Ray looked his son in the eye. Yes, Carl, everything is true. I'm sorry it turned out that way. I understand you probably won't want to see me. And you know, that's all right. I bought a ticket to my sister's. Her husband died and it's hard for her to be alone with 2 kids. I'll go live there. I left everything to you. You'll find the documents at home. Laurie left for someone luckier. Goodbye, son. And forgive me if you can. His father headed towards the door, seemingly waiting for Carl to call out to him. Carl wanted to, but he held back. Son, why are you running around? You have a wedding today, and you're behaving like a little boy. Lydia smiled at her son, seeing as he put on a tie, then took it off and put on a bow tie. She had returned from Germany 2 months ago, where she had undergone a complicated heart surgery. Carl sold his father's business to pay for it as soon as he found out the surgery was possible. Lydia advised against it, but Carl was adamant. And now Lydia was hard to recognize. She seemed to have dropped 20 years. Mum, how can you not worry? It's like you don't know Emily. She'll change her mind 18 times and run away. Lydia laughed. She won't change her mind. She loves you. Mum, really? Do you really think so? Carl sat next to his mother on the couch and she hugged him. Well, of course. I even think she fell in love with you at first sight. But don't give me away, or she'll get me too. Mother and son laughed. Well, now that they were reunited, they were making up for all the time they had missed.